Hello everybody, it's Friday, February 21st, and we're talking Corona once again. So here's the daily update. So you can see here on the screen 76,790 cases, 2,247 deaths, and 18,590 have recovered. And these are the numbers I always look at like I've talked about in past days. You take a look at the active cases here. You see it over here, 55,953, 43,888 in mild condition, and 12,065 serious or critical condition, which is 22%. That number seems to have been holding pretty consistent for quite some time now. Take a look at the closed cases here. Cases with an outcome. 20,837. We see here 18,590 have recovered or been discharged. And then there's the 2,247 deaths like we talked about a bit above. You see here again this 11% number is holding pretty consistent since the video I did yesterday. So we definitely want to see that number start to come down. Let's take a look at the overall cases and the numbers and everything because there's some developments, obviously more of a continuation of what's been happening the past few days. You see here in China, 891 new cases. That's up from yesterday, 891 today. So we'll see what happens over the next few days. Total deaths, like you see here, 2,236, which was 118 new deaths. What the alarming thing is, and you know this if you've been keeping up with this the past few days, it's South Korea, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the next segment of the video, but 93 new cases today, puts them at 204 now. So they're really taking off, and they've got a lot of issues there, and they're starting to sound the alarm, which they're wise to do. You definitely don't want to let this thing get out of hand. So again, I'm going to cover that in the next segment of the video. Take a look at Japan, though. They've got 3 new cases, almost to triple digits for them, and then the US as well. Interesting, I just noticed this 12 new cases here. So again, we had 15 cases here prior to this and now 12 new cases today. So that's definitely something you don't want to see. You don't want to see the numbers start to take off and explode. So this is an article I archived from The Guardian for today. Daily I try to use different sources. I try to cycle through the different sources just to get an idea of what different papers are saying and kind of like the different angles they're covering things with. So today The Guardian, so let's read the headline here. It says, Coronavirus. China prisons report 500 cases as virus spreads in South Korea. Live updates. So those are the 2 things I'm going to go ahead and talk about here. I'll give you a quick summary of what it says here, even though I'm not going to hit on some of this stuff here. It says, here's a summary of what happened on Friday. 550 more passengers disembarked from the Diamond Princess. Definitely great news. We love that. 2 Australian passengers who were repatriated from Japan tested positive for the virus after arriving home. Another doctor in Wuhan died from the virus. He was 29, so pretty young, right? It's kind of one of those things where, unfortunately, and I touched on this in the past, when you're in that profession, the medical profession, you're around it all the time. I mean, all those individuals working in the profession right now are kind of worried as heck. But it says here, South Korea reported a big jump in confirmed cases to 156, as it added 52 new cases on Friday. The vast majority of new cases were in the city of Daegu, where special measures were put in place to control the virus's spread. New cases in China reported on Friday totaled 1,119, up from 394 reported on Thursday. So I was a little low earlier. I was thinking it was like in the 350 range. It was closer to 400. It says here the total number of infections now stands at 75,685. And those numbers are a little bit different than the worldometers, but I read a little bit further down into this article. I'm not going to talk about it, but I guess Wuhan had underreported some of their cases by about 300. So that's why the numbers look different from the previous segment of the video, the worldometers number I covered, to this number. So this number here looks to be the more accurate number. So new cases Friday, 1,109, and not the earlier number we saw, which was in the 800s. It says here, China reported 118 deaths nationally, which was in the worldometers number. So the total number of deaths, again, was 2,236. And then this is the story I want to hit on too. 500 Chinese prisoners are infected with the COVID-19 across 3 provinces. This includes 230 inmates at Wuhan's women's prison, where the director was sacked. So first up here, that prison story they were talking about. 500 Chinese prisoners infected with COVID-19. The director of Wuhan's women's prison has been removed from her position, according to Hubei Daily, where it's believed 230 inmates have tested positive for COVID-19. Another 41 prisoners in Shenyang, Hanjin prison were also tested positive, according to reports in a Hubei Daily. We have a tweet here from Xin Su, and she reiterates what was stated above. Hubei Daily: 271 prisoners in Hubei are now infected, among which 230 are in Wuhan's women's prison and 41 are in Shenyang Hanjin prison. Head of the women's prison has already been sacked, and an officer in Hanjin was given a serious warning for omitting contact history. The Global Times has reported on new cases in prisons in 2 other provinces, 202 in Shandong and 28 in Zhejiang. She says here, by my calculation, that adds up to 500 new cases in prisons across 3 provinces. And I guess if we take a moment to think about that, we can think about it in the same way we think about the Diamond Princess, right? Regardless of how they're trying to quarantine or how you're trying to quarantine somebody, if you're trying to tell me that I'm in here and there's a possibility of this, or some individuals actually test positive for it, and you're keeping me confined in this space somehow with these individuals where even the best containment methods obviously haven't worked. We still have to share, say for instance, in prison or even on the ship, you still have to share eating quarters. And I say share, not necessarily meaning at the same time, but possibly an eating quarters, sleeping areas possibly. You've got restrooms, common areas, all these other type of like rec areas, if those are on a ship or in the prison itself. So the opportunity for the virus to spread seems really high, but what do? It's not like you can just say, oh, we've got this one person on the ship, or these couple people on the ship, or these couple people in prison that have this. Okay, let's get everybody else out. You can't really do that. You're really stuck in terms of how you can go ahead and try to contain the spread of it. So while in some ways from the personal side, obviously I've said this before, it's got to be a nightmare for these individuals involved, but from a practical matter, it's maybe in some way I'm willing to cut a little slack, because how do you really manage it, right? How do you ensure that the infection doesn't get out when we don't really have knowledge right now of all these ways to keep it from spreading, obviously, as we've seen in a lot of these places around the world where the virus is starting to take hold in some way. There's measures we're taking, but nothing's really been 100% effective yet. So, but people are out there trying. So, like I said, I'm willing to cut some slack on it. Obviously, you have to sack somebody if 230 people come down with it all of a sudden, or if they're not being forthright with the information. That much I get. Like I said, it's tough. I can't imagine being one of these individuals in charge of this, trying to keep this thing from spreading and wherever I'm at, be that in a prison, a city, a cruise ship. So it's definitely a tough thing to ask of somebody. And this was the one other thing I wanted to talk about today about South Korea. So it says here, 80% of new South Korean virus cases are in the city of Daegu. We're getting some more detail on the 52 new cases of COVID-19 in South Korea. Yonhap News Agency is reporting that 41 are in the city of Daegu, 300 kilometers southeast of Seoul and the neighboring North Gyeongsang province. Another 3 were reported in Seoul, the Korea Center for Disease Control and Prevention said in a statement. Of the 52 new cases, 39 are linked to the Shincheonji Church of Jesus in Daegu. Around 1,000 members of the church have been asked to self-isolate. Yonhap also reported that military personnel have been confirmed as having COVID-19. 3 cases were confirmed, 1 each in the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, it said. All 3 are believed to have visited or contacted people from Daegu. Meanwhile, in the capital of Seoul, authorities are taking measures to curtail the virus, including banning rallies and closing down Shincheonji church services, Yonhap said. So obviously, aside from China, this is going to be an interesting development to follow over the next few days to a week, and further out, obviously, but just to see how this thing goes. If this thing really explodes like it looks like it's starting to, or if they're able to in some way curtail it. I think back to Singapore, talked about them several days ago in one of my videos, how they were being really proactive in trying to educate people and trying to ensure the best way they could that the virus wouldn't spread there. I don't know what kind of measures South Korea is taking, so perhaps we'll look at that in the coming days. But again, this is something that once you see the numbers start to explode, they weren't even on the map in terms of this until a few days ago. We saw the number of new cases take off in a way, right? Oh, it was 10 a day, 20 a day, 40, now we're up to 50, to where they've really pushed into being the country with the second most number. Right? Japan had held that title for a while, the indubious title. Clearly now Korea is starting to see some issues there, so hopefully they're going to be able to get a handle on this. Like I was saying in these videos, I mean, people that watch these, what do you think, right? we're sitting here, and obviously I haven't talked much about the flu and the number of deaths that occur from that, and I'll hit on that in another video, but I think that the reason why this gets so much more attention is because of what's the best way to go about putting this, say, the nature in which it kind of spreads, and the whole mystery involving kind of what I say always, the transparency and the lack thereof. And with the flu, it's just kind of this thing that happens every year, right? We don't even think about it. We just go get our shot, we try to take precautions, but in this case, you have a situation where a government may not be as forthcoming, we don't know the numbers, and I think that really leads to a situation where it gets people's minds really churning, like, hey, like the whole mystery of it all is really what drives the story and makes it something that people are more interested in than just the common flu, if we're calling it common. But that's just my thought on it. But what do you think about this? I've heard some other people talking, and perhaps this is a good idea, and we'll see what happens in Korea, but people are talking about this, and I've touched on it in some of my videos last week, but basic preparation. You don't want to be caught with no supplies if something like this ever does take hold in any US city. Maybe it's a little too early to start thinking about that, but just keep it in mind. Basic things, you want to make sure you have extra bottled water on hand, extra canned goods, maybe some extra batteries, things like that. So just basic kind of things that you could have, just basic things that people would be rushing out to the store to buy if all of a sudden there was a day here in the US where there were 100 new cases, because like I've said before, you know how fear and panic are. Those could be far more detrimental than the disease itself. So you don't want to be caught in a situation where you don't have any water, or you don't have any rice or beans or anything like that in your pantry. So like I said, just something basic like that, something to think about in the weeks ahead. If, and I'm not there yet, if it gets to a point where it looks like maybe it'll start to take hold anywhere in the US. We saw 12 new cases overnight. That pretty much doubled the number. So definitely keep an eye on these numbers and kind of think about basic things that you could do. We're not talking about end of the world stuff, obviously, but just keep it in mind. Just from me to you, just kind of keep that in mind. All right, so that's the video. Let me know what you guys think. Take care, everybody, and thanks as always for watching.